We begin with a Tulsa pastor charged with raping his own daughter. And tonight she tells us coming forward is key to her recovery.
What you're about to watch is a true story, an event that really happened to real people. This true crime account may be disturbing to both viewers and listeners. Thus, discretion is strongly advised.
He would pray over me at first, but he would do a lot of touching while he was praying.
What makes a man of God? Is it the collar around his neck? The verses he quotes? The prayers he leads? Or is it something deeper? An unwavering moral compass? A dedication to protecting the innocent? A commitment to practicing what he preaches? For generations, we've entrusted our spiritual and moral guidance to religious leaders, believing that their connection to the divine somehow makes them more virtuous, more trustworthy, more human. We send our children to their youth groups, seek their counsel in times of crisis, and look to them as examples of righteous living. But what happens when the shepherd becomes the wolf? When the very person meant to protect the flock is the one hunting it? In September 2024, a community in Tulsa, Oklahoma, grappled with this very question. A Facebook post appeared, not from a tabloid journalist or a disgruntled church member, but from a young woman named Harmony Bailey Oates. Her words would shake the foundations of not just a church but an entire community's faith in those they trusted most. As a victim of sexual and mental abuse at the hands of my dad, Pastor Bailey, for over a decade, I feel compelled to warn others about his predatory behavior, she wrote. Despite his status as a respected member of the community, it is essential to shed light on his actions to prevent further harm to unsuspecting individuals. This wasn't just another scandal. This wasn't just another headline. This was the beginning of a story that would force us to confront our deepest assumptions about trust, power, and the masks people wear in the name of righteousness. Pastor Theophilus, Judge Maurice Bailey Sr., stood as a pillar of the North Tulsa community. Since 2018, he has led the congregation of St. Andrew Christian Church with what appeared to be unwavering dedication. A University of Oklahoma graduate, he presented himself as more than just a religious leader. He was a community servant, a men's recovery counselor, and a guide for those seeking redemption. His sermons drew crowds, his prayers seemed to move mountains, and his presence commanded respect. Every Sunday, he stood at the pulpit, his voice carrying the weight of divine authority as he preached about morality, family, and faith. Parents trusted him with their children. Couples sought his marriage counsel. Troubled souls looked to him for guidance. But beneath this carefully constructed facade of righteousness, darkness lurked. One that had been festering long before he took the helm at St. Andrew Christian Church. Few knew that this man of God carried a history stained with previous charges. In 2010 and again in 2013, he pleaded guilty to child abuse by injury. Yet somehow these red flags were overlooked, buried under the weight of his charismatic presence and seemingly genuine dedication to spiritual leadership. The perfect family man, the devoted pastor, the community leader, these were the roles he played in public. His LinkedIn profile painted the picture of a man dedicated to service, to healing, to helping others find their way back to the light. He was living proof, many thought, that redemption was possible, and that past mistakes could be overcome through faith and dedication. But as Harmony's brave words would reveal, the truth was far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The man who stood before his congregation preaching about virtue was harboring secrets so dark that they would test the faith of even the most devout believers. The hands that were raised in prayer had committed acts that would make the devil himself recoil. The voice that spoke of God's love had whispered unspeakable things to a child who should have been able to trust him above all others. This is not just a story about a pastor who fell from grace. This is not just another tale of power corrupted or trust betrayed. This is the story of how appearances can deceive, how evil can wear the mask of righteousness, and how the courage of one young woman would finally force the truth into the light. The story of Pastor Bailey and his daughter Harmony forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about faith, trust, and the institutions we hold sacred. It challenges us to look beyond titles and positions, to question our assumptions about who can be trusted with power, and to listen, really listen, when someone finds the courage to speak truth to power. You're watching True Crime Stories 24/7. Thanks for joining. Please do well to subscribe and like this video to support us. In 2012, in a bedroom that should have been a sanctuary of childhood innocence, a sixth-grade girl knelt beside her father to pray. To an outsider, it might have seemed like a touching scene, a pastor sharing his faith with his daughter, guiding her spiritual journey. But for young Harmony, these prayers would become the first steps down a path of unimaginable horror. It began, as many nightmares do, with something that seemed innocent enough. Pastor Bailey would pray over his daughter's body, his hands moving as he asked for divine protection. But there was nothing divine about his touch, nothing holy in the way his fingers lingered, nothing godly in the way he used prayer as a shield for his perversion. "He would pray over me at first," Harmony would later recall, her voice carrying the weight of memories she had tried so hard to bury. "But he would do a lot of touching while he was praying. The words themselves seem almost clinical, but they mask a trauma so profound it would take more than a decade to fully voice." Think, for a moment, about being 13 years old. Think about the confusion of adolescence, the natural questioning of identity, and the search for understanding about love and relationships. Now imagine your father, your protector, your guide, the man society says should be the first example of how you should be treated, looking at you and saying, "I'm your boyfriend." Those words, spoken by Pastor Bailey to his teenage daughter, would become a psychological prison. Think of a 13-year-old girl confused about who true love is because her dad is saying, "I'm your boyfriend," Harmony would later tell investigators, her words cutting through years of silence to expose the twisted manipulation at the heart of her abuse. The grooming was methodical and calculated. Bailey used every weapon in his arsenal: his position as a father, his authority as a pastor, his understanding of faith and fear. When Harmony tried to resist, tried to set boundaries, he had an answer for everything. "I knew how to set a boundary," she would later explain, "but whenever he's your father and whenever he's a pastor, and whenever he has this authority and he has a record, it's like you say no. But what does your no mean? What does your no mean when the person violating your boundaries is the same person who teaches you about right and wrong? What does your no mean when your abuser holds not just physical power over you, but spiritual power as well?" These were the questions that haunted Harmony's adolescence, questions no child should ever have to ask. As she entered her teenage years, the abuse escalated. The inappropriate touching during prayer sessions evolved into something far more sinister. By the time she was 16 or 17, Bailey had progressed to rape, crossing the final boundary between father and predator. "Jumping from touching to sex is not a big deal for me," he would later tell authorities, his words revealing a chilling casualness about his crimes. To survive this horror, Harmony developed a psychological coping mechanism that would both protect and haunt her. "The thing is, whenever I was a kid, I separated my dad from who he was," she explained. "I had to. That's the only way I survived." This splitting of reality, the public father versus the private monster, became her survival strategy. The cruel irony was that she found herself playing along with the facade, maintaining the image of the perfect pastor's daughter while carrying the weight of unspeakable trauma. "I would call him my best friend," she admitted, only to hide the reality of what I was living. Those words, heartbreaking in their honesty, reveal the complex web of denial, survival, and manipulation that characterized her childhood. Behind the closed doors of their home, Bailey wielded another weapon: spiritual manipulation. He told his daughter that revealing their secret would be a total catastrophe to the whole kingdom of God. Imagine the burden placed on a young girl's shoulders, being told that speaking the truth about her abuse would somehow damage God's kingdom. It was a masterclass in manipulation, using faith itself as a tool of oppression. The abuse didn't follow a schedule. It didn't respect the boundaries of time or place. It could happen during prayer, during what should have been normal father-daughter interactions, or in the dead of night. Each incident chipped away at Harmony's sense of self, her understanding of love, and her faith in both man and God. And all the while, Sunday after Sunday, Bailey would stand at his pulpit, preaching about morality, family values, about God's love. He would counsel other families, guide other children, and present himself as a moral authority while returning home to continue his reign of terror over his own daughter. Years passed this way, each day adding another layer to the trauma, each act of abuse driving the wedge deeper between Harmony's public persona and her private pain. But even as Bailey worked to break her spirit, something within Harmony remained unbroken, a spark of resilience that would eventually light the way to her liberation, though the path would be longer and more painful than anyone could have imagined. The story of these dark years forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, about faith, and about the ways predators can use our most sacred institutions as weapons. It challenges us to question how many other Harmonies might be out there, silently carrying burdens too heavy to bear, trapped behind walls of spiritual manipulation and parental authority. But more than that, it reminds us that sometimes the greatest acts of evil don't announce themselves with dramatic flourishes. Sometimes they come wrapped in prayer, whispered in the name of love, hidden behind the collar of respectability. And sometimes, the most insidious predators are the ones we've been taught to trust the most. Freedom. It's a word that holds different meanings for different people. For some, it's a political ideal. For others, a spiritual state. But for Harmony Bailey Oates, freedom meant something far more fundamental. Escape from the house where prayers had become weapons and a father's love had become a curse. When she finally moved out, it should have been her liberation. She had found love. Real love, not the twisted perversion her father had forced upon her. She got married, building a life with someone who would show her what genuine care and respect looked like. And then, the ultimate symbol of new beginnings. She had a baby, a chance to break the cycle, to create the kind of family she had been denied. But freedom, as Harmony would discover, isn't just about physical distance. The shadows of abuse have a way of following their victims, stretching across miles and years, reaching out with dark fingers to snatch away any sense of security. In 2021, just weeks after giving birth, during what should have been one of the most joyous times of her life, the nightmare returned. Pastor Bailey, the man who had tormented her childhood, wasn't content to let her escape. He came to her new home, her sanctuary, uninvited and unannounced. The place where she should have felt safest became the scene of yet another violation. Picture this: a new mother, still recovering from childbirth, still adjusting to the beautiful chaos of caring for a newborn, suddenly confronted by her abuser in her own home. There was no prayer this time, no pretense of paternal care. Bailey pushed his daughter to the floor and forcibly assaulted her, adding another traumatic chapter to a story that should have been over. But even this wasn't enough. In the days and weeks that followed, Harmony would catch glimpses of him, a shadow at her window, a figure in the darkness. Her father, the pastor, had become a stalker, peering into her private space, refusing to relinquish his grip on her life. Each sighting was a reminder that physical escape wasn't enough, that the prison he had built for her had walls made of fear and trauma that no physical distance could tear down. Think about what this does to a person's sense of safety. Every creak in the night becomes a potential threat. Every shadow could hide a predator. Every window becomes a potential portal for evil to enter. The home that should have been her fortress, her new beginning, became another battlefield in a war she never asked to fight. For those who have never experienced such a violation, it's hard to comprehend the psychological toll. This wasn't just about the physical assault. It was about power, about control, about showing her that even in her new life, even with her own family, she wasn't free. She could move away, she could build walls, she could change the locks, but he would find a way to remind her of his presence. The stalking, because that's what it was, a pastor stalking his own daughter, created a new kind of prison. Not one with physical bars, but one built of hypervigilance and fear. Every time she drew the curtains, every time she locked a door, every time she heard an unexpected sound, she had to wonder, was he out there? Was he watching? Would he come back? This period of Harmony's life illustrates a cruel truth about abuse. Sometimes, what we think of as escape is just the beginning of a new chapter in the nightmare. The physical distance she had created, the new life she had built, the family she was creating, none of it was enough to keep him away. The man who had used prayer as a pretext for abuse now didn't even need that pretense. He had shown his true face, stripped of any religious veneer. But even in these darkest moments, something was changing within Harmony. Each violation, each intrusion, each moment of fear was also building something else. Rage. Not the kind of rage that destroys, but the kind that fuels transformation. The kind that would eventually give her the strength to do something that would shake her community to its core. Because while Pastor Bailey might have thought he was demonstrating his power over her, what he was actually doing was providing evidence. Each unwanted visit, each violation, and each act of stalking was another piece of proof that would eventually help bring his crimes to light. He might have thought he was maintaining his control, but he was actually building the case that would lead to his downfall. The story of this period in Harmony's life forces us to reconsider what we think we know about abuse and escape. It reminds us that freedom isn't just about physical distance, that healing isn't just about moving away, and that sometimes the path to true liberation requires facing our demons head-on, even when those demons wear clerical collars and call themselves Father. But more than that, it shows us that sometimes what looks like a victory lap for the predator, that final demonstration of power, can become the very thing that leads to their undoing. While Bailey was proving he could still reach her, still hurt her, still control her, he was also proving something else. That he was exactly the monster she would eventually expose him to be. The shadows he cast on her windows would eventually become shadows of his own freedom. The power he thought he was demonstrating would ultimately become evidence of his crimes. And the daughter he thought he could silence forever was gathering her strength for a revelation that would change everything. There's a saying that the truth will set you free, but what they don't tell you is how much that freedom can cost. For Harmony Bailey Oates, the price of truth would be paid in fragments of courage, collected one confession at a time. The first person she told was her husband, the man who had shown her what real love looked like, who had helped her build a life away from her father's shadow. Imagine that conversation. Finding the words to explain how the man who had given her away at their wedding was the same man who had stolen her innocence. How do you tell someone you love that your father, a respected pastor, had turned your childhood into a nightmare? Then came her older brother. Family dynamics are complex enough without having to reveal that the father you shared was a predator. But Harmony found the strength, adding another ally to her corner, another witness to her truth. But the hardest conversation lay ahead. Telling her mother, Erika, meant shattering not just a marriage but an entire worldview. How do you tell a woman that the man she married, the father of her children, the spiritual leader she trusted, had been molesting their daughter under their own roof? That the prayers she thought were bringing their daughter closer to God were actually covers for abuse? These conversations, each one a battle against shame and fear, began to crack the wall of silence Bailey had built around his crimes. But it wasn't until August 2023 that Harmony took the next crucial step. She went to the police. Yet, even then, she wasn't ready to press charges. The weight of what would follow, the public exposure, the legal battles, the community reaction, felt too heavy to bear. But something changed in September 2024. Perhaps it was the accumulated weight of years of silence. Perhaps it was the knowledge that her father could be hurting others. Or perhaps it was simply that her truth had grown too big to contain anymore. Whatever the catalyst, on September 17, 2024, Harmony did something extraordinary. She went public. Her Facebook post was like a stone thrown into still water, creating ripples that would reach far beyond her immediate circle. "For too long, I suffered in silence," she wrote, afraid of the repercussions of speaking out against someone with such influence and power. However, I have come to realize that silence only perpetuates the cycle of abuse, and it is crucial to break free from the chains of fear and shame. The evidence began to mount. There was a recorded phone call where Bailey, confronted by his daughter, begged her not to tell her husband, claiming that the secret getting out would be a total catastrophe to the whole kingdom of God. The same man who had used God as a shield for his abuse was now trying to use him as a shield from consequences. Then came the text messages to his wife, digital confessions that would prove devastating. "I am an adulterer. I am a child molester. I am a rapist," he wrote, each admission like a nail in the coffin of his carefully constructed public image. He described himself as an unfaithful husband and an uncommitted father, concluding with the declaration that he was a terrible person who deserves the consequences of his actions. But perhaps most chilling were his attempts to justify his actions. In messages to his wife, he admitted to watching pornography involving incest, saying he felt justified in acting out what was shown in the pornography because it was what people do. Even his therapist became entangled in the web of revelations. Bailey had admitted his crimes in therapy, leading to an email exchange where his counselor warned him about the legal obligation to report child abuse. Bailey's response? He felt tricked and thought he was safe to disclose in therapy. The impact of Harmony's courage was immediate and far-reaching. Another victim came forward, proving what many feared, that predators rarely have just one victim. The family, except for Bailey, rallied around Harmony. "You are a strong, intelligent, and talented young woman," they wrote in a public statement. "No one should ever have their trust and safety violated in such a horrific way, especially by their own father. We are all so deeply sorry this happened to you." But perhaps the most powerful element of Harmony's story wasn't in the details of the abuse or the evidence of her father's guilt. It was in her resilience, her refusal to let her father's actions define her. "The damage he has done is immeasurable," she wrote. "It has poisoned my relationships, poisoned my mind. It has filled me with doubts and fears, with a sense of worthlessness that I struggle to overcome. He left me broken, shattered, a shell of the person I could have been. And yet I refuse to let him define me." In speaking her truth, Harmony didn't just break her own silence. She created a space for others to break theirs. She showed that sometimes the most powerful act of faith isn't in keeping silent to protect the church, but in speaking out to protect others. She proved that sometimes the most godly thing you can do is expose evil, even when, especially when, that evil wears a collar and preaches from a pulpit. In the aftermath of Harmony's revelation, justice began to move swiftly. On September 21, 2024, Bailey resigned from St. Andrew Christian Church, where he had preached for 6 years. 4 days later, he was charged with multiple felonies, 2 counts of first-degree rape, child sexual abuse, forcible sodomy, incest, and first-degree burglary. The man who once commanded respect from his pulpit now sat in Tulsa County Jail, held on a $500,000 bond. On October 1, 2024, he stood before a different kind of judgment than the one he had preached about, pleading not guilty to the charges against him. His preliminary hearing was set for November 1st, marking the beginning of what promises to be a long journey through the justice system. But while Bailey awaits his legal fate, Harmony continues her journey of healing and empowerment. "I'm learning to trust God more," she says, her faith remarkably unbroken despite her father's attempts to weaponize it against her. "I know he has me and every other victim. And I know that he has been guiding me through this whole journey. And I know he will come for me like a father, even though my dad did not." Her words carry a powerful message. That true faith can survive even when its representatives fail us. That healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals. And that speaking out can transform victims into survivors. "Coming out of the darkness makes you a survivor," she declares. "It feels like I'm not in the shadows anymore." The story of Harmony Bailey Oates is more than just another true crime narrative. It's a testament to the human spirit's capacity to survive, to heal, and to protect others. It's a reminder that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they wear clerical collars and quote scripture. And most importantly, it's a call to action for all of us to listen, to believe, and to stand with survivors when they find the courage to speak their truth. For every Harmony who has found her voice, there are countless others still trapped in silence. Their abusers might be pastors, teachers, coaches, or other authority figures who use their position to prey on the vulnerable. But Harmony's story shows us that no position is too powerful, no secret too dark, and no predator too untouchable when survivors find the courage to speak and communities find the courage to listen. If you've been moved by Harmony's story, if you believe in the importance of exposing darkness to light, please take a moment to share this story with everyone you know who may need to listen to this story. And if you want to hear more stories of survival and justice, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Every week, we bring you carefully researched, respectfully told true crime narratives that matter. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our community of truth seekers and justice advocates. As I draw the curtain, don't forget that silence protects predators. Speaking out protects victims. This has been True Crime Stories 24/7. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and never stop fighting for justice. Thanks for watching. God bless you.